I'm late to the party, but bear with me, okay? Back in December, I decided to bite the bullet and finally get the game that everyone was raving about. Well, after 3 months and over 100 hours of playtime later, I finally finished my first ever run-through of Baldur's Gate 3. And after finishing this run-through, I started my second one, my Dark Urge run-through, the very next day. And I'm not alone in this. Pretty much everyone who has played Baldur's Gate 3 has done multiple run-throughs, or at least has plans for multiple run-throughs. Some people, including some of my friends, don't even stop at finishing a run-through before starting the next one, and we'll have multiple on the go at the same time. Interactive storytelling is not new, but Baldur's Gate 3's implementation of this practice is so incredible. The world is absolutely sweeping with so many interesting characters and side quests and personalities that it leads to an immense replayability because you're almost bound to miss something on your first run through. And unlike other story-based video games, Baldur's Gate 3 gives players the opportunity to do basically whatever they want, and their actions actually have consequences and benefits to them. So many people have made videos about Baldur's Gate and the incredible writing, the incredible stories, the incredible setting, and I don't want to just make another video saying the same thing that you all have been hearing. So I want to talk specifically about one aspect of Baldur's Gate 3's storytelling that I found really interesting, and it's something that I know a little bit about. And that is the doubling of characters, stories, and themes through Baldur's Gate 3. If you're not familiar with the concept of doubling, this is something that is present especially in Gothic literature, where you have two characters or two themes that create tension between two complete opposites, while also pointing out the similarities between these opposites. This can be something like a protagonist and an evil antagonist who has many of these same traits, but is the complete opposite side of the coin from each other. This can be things like the tensions between life and death, and the way that these boundaries can be blurred. Baldur's Gate 3 uses this doubling to try and explore different themes, as well as introduce you to different characters and how they deal with similar backstories and character development. So, without further ado, let's dive right in.
Has the tadpole ravaged your senses?
Shadowheart and Lae'zel, everyone's favorite sarcastic girls. These two start off as mortal enemies, to the point where one night you can wake up in camp to find them quite literally at each other's throats. But as you progress through the game, you realize that they are not as different as they initially appear. Both come from very matriarchal, cult-like communities, with Shadowheart being a Shar worshipper and Lae'zel being a worshipper of Vlaakith, the queen of the Githyanki. Both of them are trained to fight, are oftentimes very brash and rude, and they both hold a deep disdain for those that they believe stand against them. For Shadowheart, that is Selenites, and for Lae'zel, that is anyone who is not a Githyanki. As you progress through their stories, you realize that both of their leaders are not as stand-up citizens as they may first appear. And the triggering event for this freedom is personal betrayal. For Shadowheart, she finds out that she was taken from her parents, that they're being held captive and being used against her. For Lae'zel, she discovers that the Prince of the Comet, Orpheus, is still alive, and that Vlaakith has lied about everything that she's done. And before that, she finds out that the whole idea of being purified from the Ghaik infection is actually not even real. These personal betrayals lead to intense political battles, intense breakdowns of what they believe to be true, and you get to watch as these two characters trying to figure out who they are in the wake of everything they've ever known being destroyed. What could be a simple political drama as they try and overthrow the person that they were originally followers of becomes instead a deeply personal and harrowing tragedy. We get to see how it deeply affects each of these characters, not just on a larger level, but also on their personal levels. In my first ever run through, Shadowheart was forced to sacrifice her parents, a choice that was absolutely impossible. And Lae'zel, though now free of Vlaakith, was fighting in a massive war against her. So, even though they did have good endings, they were somewhat bittersweet. And it's not just the storylines of these two that mirror each other, but but also their character development. They are simultaneously very similar and very opposite from each other. Both of them start off as sarcastic and harsh and eventually reveal a softer side, but Shadowheart is initially quite secretive. She's quite quiet, she sticks to the shadows, whereas Lae'zel is quite loud, she's quite brash, she's willing to tell you her beliefs anytime you ask, and in fact tell you why yours are wrong. So while they are both very similar to each other in their beliefs, they're very distinct from each other in the way that they perpetuate them. To me, the best part about this is that their arguably good endings mirror their two personalities. Shadowheart, the more quiet one, can end up as an adventurer, something that is more personal, more solo, and something that allows her to do good and sort of atone for the bad things that she feels she's done. Whereas Lae'zel, the more loud and brash character, can end up being a fighter and fighting for the freedom of the Githyanki. I do want you guys to know I am primarily basing this on my first run through. I have not finished my Dark Urge run through yet, so I can't comment on what their other endings might look like. Though to be frank, I don't think I could ever tell Shadowheart to stay committed to Shar. So to me, this is exactly how you take the theme of doubling and apply it to characters. You have two characters who are so different from each other, yet so similar, who have endings which perfectly mirror their own personalities. You get these two characters who are conflicting with each other initially, but grow to be allies. And both get freedom at a price that is absolutely terrible and devastating personally. The ending they are left with after this freedom is perfectly suited to their strengths.
This is a gift, you know. I won't forget it.
Karlach and Astarion are the favorites within the Baldur's Gate community, and honestly, on the surface, they seem like complete opposites. Karlach is super kind, upbeat, and cheerful. Astarion is snarky, self-interested, and closed off, though with good reason after you learn his absolutely devastating backstory. However, these conflicting personalities actually showcase their different responses to very similar trauma. Astarion has been made a vampire and has suffered centuries of abuse and mistreatment. Karlach was betrayed by someone that she trusted and looked up to, and was made to fight in someone else's war and be someone else's experiment. Both of these stories deal with the issue of their bodily autonomy being taken from them. Karlach, whose heart has been forcefully taken away from her, rebels by giving her heart and her love and kindness to anyone she can, being loving, being kind. Astarion, who has been made to work for someone else's benefit, instead uses the only thing he knows how to do to instead work for his own benefit. Unfortunately, these trauma responses lead to very similar endings. Both Karlach and Astarion have both very bittersweet endings, even if they are the good ones. For Karlach, and this will depend on what you consider to be Karlach's good ending, your options are either she can go on knowing that her heart is eventually going to explode, or she will have to return to Avernus, or she can decide to turn into an Illithid to save her friends and save the world, but leave herself completely changed. Astarion can either kill Cazador, his tormentor, finally getting revenge on everything that he's done and be free, but still be a vampire spawn and not able to walk in the sunlight. Or he can ascend in the place of Cazador, sacrificing all of his fellow victims and all the people that he could have been redeemed by, and perpetuating the cycle of abuse. Neither of these characters have a perfectly wrapped up end, and as a player, you get to decide what happens to them. Do they continue on their current path of caring and self-sacrificing, or self-serving and self-protective, or do they come to accept their new realities? Now, the interesting part about this doubling is that if you choose the same choice between acceptance or continuing on the current path, in my opinion, you actually get opposite good and bad ends for Astarion and Karlach. If Astarion learns to accept his situation, he kills Cazador and is free, but he's still a vampire spawn. But if you encourage him to continue on his current path, he will ascend, becoming a completely different person, and really amplifying the worst possessive and self-interested parts of himself. For Karlach, if you choose acceptance, she will be forced back to Avernus, because her heart won't be able to exist on Faerun. But if you choose to have her continue on her current path, she will choose to become an Illithid to save the day, and while she is changed, she's still Karlach. While you might not agree with me that that is the good ending, I feel that it is somewhat better of the two, since it's her own choice. she gets to choose what she wants, and she finally takes back autonomy of her own body. Once again, the doubling of these characters showcases their similar situations, but reveals their completely opposite responses to dealing with this trauma. And the ending, of course, if you choose a similar path for them, give you complete opposite results, because their responses are very different from each other.
You're now in the company of plain old Gale Wyll.
Gale and Wyll are probably the most polarizing companions in the game, and I will not hear a single bad thing about my beloved wizard husband, okay? If you don't like Gale, you can keep your bad opinion to yourself. Gale and Wyll are two characters that have a lot of self-doubt and a lot to prove. Both have been given powers by horrible magic ladies, and both have been taken advantage of by said horrible magic ladies. Both of these characters are on personal quests to try and prove themselves after having made a terrible decision. For Wyll, making a deal with Mizora, and for Gale, trying to access Netherrace magic and ending up with a magical nuke in his chest. What results in this is these two men who are very intense people pleasers who need to feel useful in order to feel like they matter. Gale's story is one that hit me really hard, harder than I expected. The man was so good at magic that his celestial teacher fell in love with him, and now he deals with feeling like he will never be good enough. Wyll is dealing with familial issues, and honestly, his story needs to be fleshed out so much more because they did him so dirty. But the few fleshed out moments that we have between him and his dad currently, honestly, they make me cry every time I go through them. When you first meet these characters, they come across as self-centered, cocky, self-righteous, but as you get to know them more, you realize that this is all a facade. The Blade of Frontiers is a showy persona that Wyll has adopted in order to prove to himself and to everyone else that he can atone for his mistakes, that he can do good, and that he isn't the heretic that his father believes him to be. And Gale's wizardly superiority stems from the fact that he doesn't believe he'll ever be good enough, and that he can never have any sort of relationship with someone without being a complete burden on this person. Throughout this game, you can encourage Gale's unhealthy ambition and Wyll's desire to follow whatever Mizora does so that she will eventually let him out of his contract, or you can encourage them to make a change. And unlike Karlach and Astarion, if you take the same path with both of these two characters, you will get similar endings. I would argue that Gale is one of the few characters in this game who have a genuinely good ending, and though Wyll's good endings are arguably bittersweet, I would still say that they're better than the good endings for a lot of the other characters. Instead of focusing on the ending of these characters, we instead see this doubling through their journey to the end and the lessons that they learn. Both Gale and Wyll learn to live with their mistakes and admit that they messed up and find happiness despite that. This doubling focuses on the dysfunction of relationships that lead to unfair and uneven expectations on people, and the dangers that trying to live up with these expectations can lead to. This is something that most of us can probably relate to. Not to say that people won't relate to Shadowheart or Karlach, but these small and personal moments, these relationships between father and son and Gale and Mystra, it ends up being something that is so deeply rooted and genuine, but scaled up to fit into a fantasy setting.
I'm so sorry, my lord. She's an unbeliever outside my control.
Try again.
I also want to talk about the doubling of themes, which is mostly an excuse to what I believe is the strongest part of this game's story, and that is Act 2 and the introduction of Ketheric Thorm. Ketheric Thorm, in my opinion, is the best member of the Dead Three. We have an entire act building up his backstory. His design is incredible and imposing, and his voice acting is absolutely immaculate. And by J. Jonah Jameson, by no less. In comparison to the General of Moonrise Towers, Gortash looks like a man in his 30s who never outgrew his Panic at the Disco phase, and Orin looks like a murderous, psycho, sentient piece of marble countertop. Act Act 2 of Baldur's Gate 3 takes place entirely in the Shadowheart lands, the town and wilderness surrounding Moonrise Towers where Ketheric Thorm is holed up. These lands have been twisted by darkness, which transforms anything touched into it into a corrupt monster version of itself, and has been deeply corrupted by the dark deeds of Ketheric. As we navigate through this land, we also meet Ketheric's children, who all have been twisted by Ketheric's dark experiments beyond the point of recognition. We see Ketheric's tragic story of the loss of his wife Melodia and then his daughter Isabel, and how this turned him into a desperate man who was willing to turn to Merkel in order to try and bring them back. The saddest part about Ketheric's story is that you can actually convince him not to fight you at the end of the act just by making him think about what his wife would have wanted. The Shadow Curse does not lift from the land until Ketheric is defeated, finally reunited with Melodia. The doubling of Ketheric's hurt with that of the land is also doubled with a character, and I'm not actually talking about everyone's favorite druid, I am talking about his little friend, the personification of nature himself, Thaniel. Thaniel, as the personification of nature, has been deeply injured by Ketheric's darkness that has corrupted the land and has been split into two parts. Thaniel, who has been sent to another plane, and Oliver, a dark version of him who has been trapped in the darkness playing hide and seek with the shadows. Like Ketheric, Thaniel, or rather Oliver, cannot be healed until Ketheric is gone. And like Ketheric, he is hesitant to accept your pity or your help. Oliver has been left to the darkness and has learned to accept the darkness as warmth and the shadows as some sort of familial embrace. And much like Ketheric, it is not until you remind him of who he is and what he is lost that you actually see a change in this character. Act 2 is amazing because it makes us look at this imposing, terrifying undead general and have him compared to a tiny little boy. And it makes you realize that even antagonists can just be hurt people desperate to cling on to any sense of control and safety. And in this way, Ketheric actually forms another double with your companions, most of whom are also very hurt and very scared people who are desperate for control and safety. All in all, Baldur's Gate 3 is a game that has absolutely incredible storytelling, incredible characters, an amazing world, and dives into some amazingly powerful themes. Many people have talked about this game and its amazing story, and it deserves every single accolade that it has received. I wanted to make a video to talk about this because it's been such an amazing experience playing this game and seeing how much work went into it and seeing how deep the story is. But I also wanted to bring something new to the table and talk about something that I noticed in this story that I felt would be interesting. Honestly, this video could have been hours long if I was willing to talk about everything I loved about this game, but we needed to cut it down a little bit. I've been interested in interactive storytelling as a medium for a long time, and this makes me so excited for the application of that medium. It plays to the strengths of interactive fiction so well, and even as is, it's already an incredible story. If you're a fan of fantasy and you haven't played Baldur's Gate, but you're on the fence about it, I highly suggest giving it a try. It's really good. Although I will say that if you got this far in the video, you probably are already a fan of this game and you are probably not new to it. But if you are, honestly, props for sticking it out. But that's it for me today. I hope you enjoyed this video. Let me know in the comments if there are any themes in Baldur's Gate that you found super interesting and which of the stories of the companions you felt was the one that hit you the hardest. And if you can't choose just one, that's fine, because neither can I. But that's it for today. I hope you enjoyed, and I will see all of you lovely people in the next video. Bye!